From KUOW in Seattle, you are listening to Soundside. I am producer Jason Burrows, and today on the show, we are looking back at a few of my favorite stories from the past year. Coming up on the show today, we've got local filmmaker Joey Clift. He's a member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe, and earlier this year, he put together a really beautiful animated short called Pow.
It was really important to me to create that sort of, animated comedy piece, but like set in a contemporary native location. And the great thing about a show like The Simpsons is you can laugh at Homer Simpson regardless of what culture you're from. And yet, if you were a part of that culture, you find so many like really great in-jokes that you might not necessarily catch if you're not part of that culture.
Pow is now vying for an Oscar nod, and we'll revisit our conversation with him later this hour. But first, one of the events I've been looking forward to for nearly half the year is taking place this Friday. The Seattle Torrent have their home opener against the Minnesota Frost at Climate Pledge Arena, and I cannot wait. Earlier this summer, after the Professional Women's Hockey League announced that both Vancouver and Seattle would be getting 2 expansion teams this season, we chatted with the Torrent's new GM, Meghan Turner. Here's Libby.
So I have to ask, how do you approach the job of creating an entire professional sports franchise from scratch? I mean, what is the order of operations to get this thing up and running?
Yeah, so it was pretty crazy to start, but order of operations first. Order of business was to try to find people other than myself to hire within the organization.
That's key, probably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, takes a village. I really wanted to get a head coach in place so that we could really build this together. Didn't want to rush that decision though. So just started my interview process right away for head coaches. And then the expansion draft came very quickly. So it was really concurrent tasks of hiring my coach to help lead the bench, and then also strategizing on the roster and what that was going to look like. Was hoping to get the coach in before the expansion draft, but things just timing wise didn't work out. So I had a team around me of advisors who knew the player pool. One was from the NCAA women's hockey world. The other one is actually on staff with the Kraken. So just wanted to surround myself with good people to help be sounding boards and bring good ideas as well. So first order of business was certainly building a team of staff, and then also building a team of players. Yeah.
So you went to the Ontario Hockey League. Steve O'Rourke is the head coach pick. What was going into your decision-making process there and the recruitment process there?
Yeah, I think it's the same players and staff. First and foremost is getting good people and just making sure that I was aligned with Steve and whoever I was going into this process, not knowing it was Steve, aligned with this person on our values and how we saw the organization being built from the ground up. I think, making sure that I had someone who I felt like we could really be partners in this and building this together. And that came first. And Steve is an amazing individual. He's just a very selfless, humble person. And I immediately kind of hit it off with him and thought from the jump that we would work really well together. And then obviously he came highly recommended in the space too, from a lot of people with really respectable backgrounds, which helped. But then just in talking to him, every time I talked to him, it just kind of solidified how I felt in the back of my mind. And my gut check was that he was the right person for the role. So he's obviously proficient and going to be a great coach to our players. And I think he's just going to be a good ambassador for the team and the league overall.
You're coming to Seattle after being an assistant GM in Boston with the Fleet. Before that, you played hockey professionally. You played at the collegiate level. What do all those experiences, what role do they play in the way that you're approaching what you want to do here in Seattle?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the history of women's hockey, to understand where we've been and where we can go, and be able to really appreciate where we are today and know that the ceiling is so high for us. So Definitely playing career, I think, gives me my pinch me moments because I never had this as a player, and could only really dream of it. And
Professional
then
women's hockey league at this level, you mean?
yes, sorry to
Mm-hmm.
clarify. Yeah,
Yeah.
just the league having the success that it's had. As you when I was younger, it was picturing me winning a Stanley Cup, which obviously wasn't a possibility. So now those little girls can picture themselves winning the Walter Cup, which is a really, really cool thing. So I think just having the playing background gives me that perspective of knowing what I used to envision versus what little girls can envision today, which is really cool in my brain. And then from the assistant GM side in the past 2 years, I think just helping me build the organization from the ground up. I was lucky enough to be hired just before the season started in year one and had a great mentor in Danielle Marmer and saw firsthand a lot of the success that she had in building a great culture in Boston. And, just some of the things we learned along the way together to be able to inform my decisions and how I structure this organization, and the people that I surround myself with to help me do so, because I know I certainly can't do it myself.
We're going to get back to Danielle Marmer because I want to know if there's a rivalry brewing between Boston and Seattle now with the expansion team joining the league. But first, when we talk about the draft picks, there was the expansion draft and then the regular season draft, which was just a couple of weeks ago. Talk to me about how you approached the draft.
Yeah, but certainly there was a lot of really good players that were in that pool for the expansion draft, which gave me a lot of excitement. A lot of good players who brought a lot of different things to the table. So first and foremost, I wanted to get the right leaders in the locker room. Obviously, Hillary was my first sign, and is when I think of one person, she is that person.
Hillary
But
Knight, Team USA captain, veteran
yep.
forward. Yeah, huge star. Yeah.
Yeah, huge star. Just an incredible person, teammate, player, all of the above. So, but I wanted the right leaders in the locker room and on the ice to be able to drive the culture. I can't be in the locker room every day doing that. Steve can't be in the locker room every day doing that. And ultimately, it's the players on the ice who are putting the puck in the net and scoring goals and winning games. So, really wanted to get the right leadership group in place and build around them. And a lot of it was just getting the right components into a style that I wanted to instill right away. So I think playing fast and playing physical is really important in this league. Those are two pretty simple concepts in theory, but it's really hard to implement in practice. So I wanted to make sure that we had some sustained offense and some size as well, to be able to put some fear into the teams that are coming on the ice with us. I'm from Boston, so I maybe have a little bit of that edge on me, or from around Boston. So, and then on the D side, just in general, just wanted to be hard to play against. Like I said, so yeah, a lot of different thoughts in terms of just how the roster, I wanted the roster to shape up with those players, but I think first and foremost it was getting good people, getting the right leaders in place, and then crafting a roster that I felt meshed well together. It wasn't just a bunch of individual good pieces.
One of the storylines I feel like that's evolving is that Seattle went very offensively focused in the draft with some of the top names that the team drafted, Alex Carpenter, Danielle Serdachny, Julia Gosling, Hannah Bilka, like a lot of really top draft pick folks or veteran players that are at the forward position. Like, were you thinking very offensively minded when you were going into the draft? Was that part of your strategy, or did it shake out that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of the draft is reacting to the decision making in the other room too. But I knew the players that I wanted heading into the draft, and I kind of had a thought of what Vancouver was going to do to start with that first pick, and then how we were going to react to that. Um, so a little bit of it is reacting to some surprises and things of that you might not have expected. As far as going offense focused, I had a lot of those players on my list, but I don't want to overlook the defenders that I got. They might not be the highest scoring defenders. I think Vancouver got those, but they are really shut down defenders. They are going to block shots. They are going to push other teams to the perimeter. So if we can, we're going to score goals and have the puck a lot on the front end, but on the back end, I don't think teams are going to have an easy time getting the puck into the slot and possessing in our zone because we're just going to have a lot of really good shutdown, solid defenders. So, obviously we have some that can get into the rush as well and score some goals, but I think it's going to be really hard to score against us. So that was also the mindset there.
So I want to get back to that rivalry I talked about. This is
All right.
we're building it now as we talk here.
Yeah.
Obviously you were coming from the Fleet. You're going to be facing off with the GM there, Danielle Marmer, who was your teammate and also, your co-pilot in Boston. What will that match mean to you when Seattle meets Boston? And do we have a new rivalry brewing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a rivalry with every team. There's only 8 teams in this league, so I want to beat them all. I have a ton of respect for Danielle. I have a ton of respect for the organization that she's built and the players that stayed in Boston and are now in Boston. But yeah, I for sure will want to beat them, as I'm sure they will want to beat us too. So it'll be an interesting, maybe a fun moment. I think it'll be fun, honestly, when we get back to Boston, and it's going to be weird to be on the other side of it and not be, down in the tunnel as much or have as many of the perks and Songus wherever we're playing. But
Yeah, you got no perks no anymore. Everything's
no,
shut down now.
I will have wherever I'm told to go is where I will be. So, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there will be a bit of a rivalry, but at the end of the day, it's all respect there.
Okay, let's talk about a name
Sure.
because Seattle does not have a name. Vancouver does not have a name. That's not, atypical. PH or PWHL teams didn't have real names and mascots and stuff until their second season. What is the timing like? Are you looking for a name now? Is marketing hard at work? Are we going to have a name before the season launches? Like, what's the deal?
I probably can't give you the best answer on that, but
Break some news
can,
here for us,
I
Megan.
I can state one thing that the league is hard at work. I'm sure putting a good brand together for everyone, and I know it'll be well received, and they're going to do a good job. They did a great job with the fleet and all the rest of the original 6 team names and logos. So I expect it's going to. It's going to be, just as good quality there. But sorry, I probably can't give you exactly what you're looking for today.
Okay, we are going to put you slightly on the spot because we did have some listeners when they heard we were going to talk to you,
Yep.
call in and write in with some name ideas.
Oh,
So
okay.
you
Well,
don't
I love
have
it.
to, tip your hand here, but we'll just throw some at you here with some recommendations. Um,
Yes.
First of all, big problem because a couple people wrote in and suggested Seattle Sirens. That name is taken, everybody. Folks, we cannot be the Seattle Sirens. That's the name of the New York team. So just to
I've
be
heard that
clear,
one too. That's
what
funny.
I mean, God, look at the team names before you get an idea in there. First off, Tim from Port Townsend called in, and here's a clip.
So we have come up with a couple of suggestions. One would be the Seattle Skates, as in the flat fish, and the other would be the Seattle Six Gills, referencing our local six-gill shark.
Okay, that's Tim's idea. Skates and 6 skills. How do that land with you, Megan?
I like it. I like the we're sticking with the Marine theme. It's good. It feels very Seattle.
I can see
I'll
somebody in
I'll
like
be
a suit, a six skill suit. Yeah.
Yeah, you always got to think of what the, what is the fan base going to come up with in terms of what they come to the rink with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would bring some good stuff.
I also got an email about Seattle Blades. Got any reaction to Seattle Blades as in hockey skate?
Yeah, we've had so the CWHL had the Boston Blades.
Ooh.
The Bruins mascot, I believe, is called Blades as well. Which I think I don't know. Don't quote me on this, but I think
Okay,
Jillian
okay.
Dempsey might have named that one back in when she was younger. So that's a good one though.
Okay.
It's a classic. Can't go wrong.
Final request. Our supervising producer here says that we should have a moratorium on any more weather-related names because the women's soccer team, of course, the rain, we've got the storm already, and the request is maybe look beyond the weather. So that's
Noted. I
feedback.
will I will pass that along.
Okay. Before we go, I heard you mention it earlier, but just the idea that the U.S. now has a professional women's hockey league that is operating at this level, that's expanding, that's investing in new communities. What does it mean to you to be a part of that? And what do you hope, like that little girl that maybe, is similar to how you were growing up and kind of falling in love with hockey? What do you hope she takes away when she gets to go to a game for the TBD named Seattle women's hockey team?
Yeah, I just hope I hope that little girl sees something achievable and that there's a path to achieve it. It's not just that this is something that's there, but creating the pipeline and the ability to get there, I think is really important. And that's something that is really important, I know, for me and for the Seattle organization, but it's super important for the league as well, just from that grassroots perspective. So yeah, it means so much to me. It's for me, this is not just a job and a career, but it's truly a passion and something that I feel so close to, and just so passionate about making sure that there's a path, there is a dream that's achievable, and that's a really cool experience that everyone that is any sort of involved in this league, I know, shares that sentiment too.
Meghan Turner is the general manager of PWHL Seattle. Meghan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Libby.
This conversation originally aired back in July, and you are listening to Soundside. When we come back, we're looking at the new novel, Murder by the Book, with author Amie Schaumberg. That's just a minute away on KUOW. You're listening to Soundside. I am Jason Burrows, and I have been reading a ton of books this year. One of my favorites was a murder mystery set here in the Pacific Northwest. We were able to catch up with the author of the novel, Amie Schaumberg, back in September, and here's that conversation.
When homicide detective Ian Carter arrives at the scene of a murder, the victim is posed to look like Ophelia from Hamlet. Not that any of the detectives on the scene realize that. The person who will crack open that clue and other twisted literary references is on the other side of their Oregon college town, English professor Emma Riley. She's struggling to get to class on time and a little sensitive about avoiding the absent-minded professor trope. It's the beginning of the new novel Murder by the Book by author Amie Schaumberg, who lives in Spokane and happens to be an English professor herself. The narrative shifts between the perspectives of Detective Carter and Professor Riley, and as the mystery unfolds, we see the crime through different lenses: literary, artistic, and forensic. Here to talk with us about her debut novel is Amie Schaumberg. Thank you so much for being here, Amie. It's great to meet you.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
So you are an English professor. You teach at Spokane Community College. Which came first, your desire to write or the calling to teach?
Definitely the desire to write. It was something I wanted to do even when I was very, very young. I remember a teacher giving me a little how to publish pamphlet when I was maybe 12 and had no idea what it meant, but sort of an inspirational moment. I decided to pursue literature after I finished my undergraduate, so that came much later.
And One of your two main protagonists, Emma Riley, is in the middle of teaching Gothic literature at her college when the narrative starts. She is notably neurodivergent. Mm-hmm. Why was it important for you to write a protagonist with that perspective?
Well, I am also neurodivergent, and honestly, I did it kind of by mistake. I didn't really realize I had given her so many of my sort of brain quirks until I was working on revisions, and I had a friend of mine read it. She's like, "Wow, Emma really reminds me of you." And then slightly later in the conversation, she's like, "Wow, Emma's kind of annoying." And so it was an interesting revelation from that particular friend, but I realized I had sort of halfway given her my neurodivergence, and after that, I decided to just really commit to it and make her a neurodivergent character and give her a neurodivergent perspective.
And for somebody who hasn't picked up the book yet, which have started reading it, and I am like completely all in on getting to the end of the narrative. It's a really cozy mystery, especially kind of as like fall is coming on and you feel that temperature cooling. You like want something to curl up with, especially a cozy mystery like this. So I'm in the middle of the book, but for somebody who hasn't picked it up yet, what kinds of examples of the way that Emma maybe interacts with the world or perceives the world differently did you include in the narrative?
The biggest one is probably just her dedication to literature and sort of a literary world. She not only reads and teaches literature, but in a lot of ways it's sort of her perspective on the world. She quotes texts a lot when she gets nervous, especially. She sort of translates information through a literary lens. And so that's sort of just might call it obsession, or as I said, dedication to that sort of literary perspective is one big thing. There's also the way she relates to other people. The way she relates to information, I think, is different than you would get from a neurotypical protagonist. And even small things, like she has some physical quirks. She flexes her hand periodically throughout the novel when she gets tense that very much come from my own neurodivergent experience.
And I understand that both Emma and yourself have the same favorite book, which is Jane Eyre, which is also one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself quoting literature like in your daily life or in your thought process? Do you call to mind passages or quotations?
More in my thought process now. I used to do it aloud much more often. And then once I got out of undergraduate and then grad school, when I wasn't hanging around quite as many just straight up nerds, I realized the rest of the world does not do that. It does not relate to that particular experience of the world. So I managed to channel it inward a lot more. But definitely I have literary quotes running through my head a lot.
You did write Emma without an official diagnosis.
Yes.
There's not like a specific neurodivergent diagnosis that she has. Is there a reason that you avoided that?
A couple of them, actually, and it was an ongoing discussion between me, my agent, and my editor. But basically, I decided that I didn't want to give her a specific diagnosis for two main reasons. One, I find a lot in books when characters are labeled, ADHD or autistic or whatever the diagnosis might be, people tend to read it with a checklist for that diagnosis. Like, let's just read the, autistic character, and then they're just so focused on comparing that to their understanding of the experience, whether it's their own or someone they know, that they don't sort of see them in a broader scope. And I really wanted Emma to be able to have that broader scope and be sort of a person who is solving a crime through a neurodivergent perspective rather than just a neurodivergent person. The other reason I really wanted to not give her a specific diagnosis is a lot of neurodivergent women particularly don't get diagnosed or don't get diagnosed till much later in life. A lot of our sort of diagnostic measurements, or the ones that they use for children, are based on male behavioral patterns. And girls, both because they don't sort of fit that archetype and because we are socialized in different ways.
There's a masking that girls do, I think, that is different. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we're sort of socialized to behave, to be quiet, to be presentable, to be all those sort of quote unquote ladylike things. I think neurodivergent girls learn to mask at a very young age. I certainly did. And so I thought it would be a much more realistic experience for Emma to not have that diagnosis and just to have a sense of difference, of otherness, but without the label to go along with it.
How did the idea of a murder-solving English professor come to you? Are you a big murder mystery buff, or did this come about like you were watching Law and Order one day, or what? Like, what? How did this story come to you?
I'm definitely a murder mystery buff. I've been reading, I particularly like the Golden Age, Agatha Christie, Naomi Marsh, Josephine Day, those sorts. I've been reading those since I was in middle school. So that sort of puzzle solving has always appealed to me. As far as why this particular sort of literary professor mode, it actually didn't start that way. I started with the idea of the art. So the idea that this killer is posing his victims like pre-Raphaelite art is one of the main themes. And I was just at an exhibit at the Tate in London, surrounded by all of these beautiful, beautiful paintings of famously dead women, and thought this is sort of a strange experience to just be surrounded by both beauty and death at the same time. And then from that thought, this would be an interesting sort of murder to pursue. And then sort of went from art to literature, largely because it's more of my comfort zone, but also because Emma just sort of came with the story and went from there.
You live in Eastern Washington. You set the book in kind of like a rural, maybe not rural, but a college town, not a big college town in Oregon.
Yes.
Beautiful setting. How did the Pacific Northwest kind of help inform the choices you made in the book?
I wanted to set it someplace familiar to me. And I lived in Washington for about 10 years. I grew up in Montana, which is, at least from Eastern Side, very close by. So it's just a familiar region. It was someplace I could draw on from sense memory when I was trying to describe things. And the other part that really appealed to me was the interesting sort of balance we get sometimes with art and literature and that sort of what we think of as urban ideas of culture and a rural setting. I've lived almost exclusively in rural communities my whole life. And so to have that sort of back and forth between a rural, sort of isolated setting with this really intense sort of art focused mystery at the middle felt like an interesting and sort of complex space to explore.
Some of your own personal expertise made it into the book, like Shakespeare. How did the writing of the story help you kind of approach these famous works in a new light?
They definitely got me thinking about them a little bit differently. I mean, some of these texts are one that I've read for years. Some of them are ones I even teach in my classes. But when you're exploring them from a forensic perspective, you're looking sort of at interestingly sort of crime scenes, if you will, it really does bring a new way to read them. I always do close reading, so picking apart the text and looking for, puzzle pieces to put together. But when you're thinking about in terms of what might inspire sort of the darker sides of humanity, what might inspire killer, what might someone who's reading this text in the darkest way get from it, it really does sort of change the perspective. And there are a lot of texts that I love and think of as just fun. Poe, for example, pops up in the book a couple of times. That when reading it through this much darker lens, it becomes, a little bit menacing as well.
I kept thinking to myself that this is almost like the perfect literary guide for like a gothic, October, like as we're approaching Halloween. You can read Murder by the Book and then you can take a number of inspiration, you can kind of use it as a reading guide too, to like spin off and read the pieces that are inspiring, not to be too grim, but are inspiring the murderer in some ways. So the literature and artistic side of the story is half the tale. How about the forensic side? Like, how did you approach that? Because that does not necessarily stem from your own life, does it?
No, not at all. So that was just research. A lot of reading, a lot of watching videos, a lot of talking to other sort of crime writers who know more than I do. Luckily, because murder mysteries are such an industry, there are a lot of books and videos and talks that are tailored specifically toward basically what writers need to know about forensics and what writers need to know about police procedural. So that is based on research, but largely invented. It definitely doesn't come from my own experience.
So there is something really great about working in genre, and you hear this from filmmakers and writers, where when you work with something like a murder mystery, you know kind of the bounds of it and you know the beats, and that can be great, but it can also be incredibly intimidating because you need to do something new in a genre that is very well tread and has a huge fan base. How did you think about both those constraints, but also the challenge of that?
So as far as the constraints, again, it goes back to the puzzle pieces. My brain works really well with putting together puzzles. It's why I like mysteries, and it's why I like reading literature, honestly. Literary analysis, in a lot of ways, is really sort of trying to find how puzzle pieces fit together. So in giving sort of the genre tropes of a murder mystery, you know basically what needs to happen. You have a body, you have a killer, you have a detective or detectives. All the pieces sort of have to fall in place. So it just becomes a matter of here's where I am starting. Here's where I know I want to end. And I am not someone who makes it up as I go along. That's way too daring for me. So I knew exactly where I was going, and you just have to sort of figure out how to put those pieces together as you go. As far as making it new, that is deeply intimidating because, as you say, this has been a very popular genre for generations. People far more talented than me have written many, many books. So I think my goal with it was just to make it my own, not necessarily to reinvent the wheel or do anything sort of big and splashy and genre defying, but really just to try to bring a different perspective and a different sort of set of ideas to the genre.
Amie Schaumberg is an English professor at Spokane Community College and the author of Murder by the Book, which is available now in bookstores everywhere. It is a literary murder mystery, really great for fall, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Amie, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Hey, before we go, because you're a Bronte fan, you mentioned we talked a little bit about Jane Eyre. I'm rereading Wuthering Heights for the first time in, like 20 years right now. I gotta know, do you have a take on the new movie version that they're doing with Jacob Elordi, Margot Robbie, movie version of Wuthering Heights? Do you think that's good casting? What do you think? Can it possibly touch the Olivier version? I need your expert opinion.
So I've only seen the trailer, obviously. I would say it's very interesting casting. I don't think it fits the original sort of vibe of the book at all. So my guess is they're going to take the story and do something much more modern with it, much sort of more quote unquote romantic. Because if you read the actual book, it's not a romance in what we think of, a romantic story nowadays. It's, tragic and tortured and everyone's kind of terrible to everyone else.
Yeah, no, there's no sympathetic characters and everyone's brutal. And the Elordi casting to me is like, well, that's very kind to Heathcliff.
Yes, it is.
But I'm on board for Charlie XCX doing the music. I mean, that's fun and modern. All right, so you're optimistic.
I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a piece of classic literature and remaking it and reinventing it and re-envisioning it. I mean, it's kind of what I did, so I'd be hypocritical to criticize them. The best thing is if someone saw that, loved it, and then went and found the book and found out, oh, there's two very unique ways to tell this story. How fascinating is that?
I love it. Amie Schaumberg, Murder by the Book is your debut novel. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You're listening to Soundside, and when we come back, Joey Clift shares what growing up going to Pow Wows meant to him and how his new short film, Pow, pays homage to that family tradition. We'll be right back in just a moment on KUOW. You are listening to Soundside. I am Jason Burrows, and I'm a movie nerd, so I've been following the campaigns of the films that are making the case for an Oscar nomination. They've really kicked off in earnest over the past few weeks. One hopeful for the short animated film category is Pow. Back in May, when the short was here for the Seattle International Film Festival, we got to talk to the guy behind the story. I don't want to spoil it, so here's Libby.
It's a story we can all relate to. 3 generations in a car headed to a family event. Parents are excited. The kid, less so. And Grandma, she's asleep in her wheelchair. In the short animated film Pow, this particular family is Native American, and they're headed to a powwow where Jake desperately searches for an outlet to charge his gaming device as his parents try to get him to participate in the festivities. Pow is a funny, touching slice of young life for Native Americans. It will be screened both this weekend at the Tulalip Reservation and next week at SIFF as part of the Family Picture Show. And here to talk about the inspiration behind the short is filmmaker Joey Clift. He's a comedian, Emmy and Peabody-nominated TV writer, director, as well as an enrolled member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe. Thanks for being here, Joey. It's so great to talk with you. I loved the short film.
Well, thanks so much for watching it. And I got to say, the Peabody nomination is new. So every time I hear it, I'm just like, oh, yay, that is an accurate thing about me.
So tell me about the inspiration behind the short. I mean, how much of yourself is put into this? Were you ever the kid at the powwow who would rather be playing video games?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This short film is based really like largely on my life. It's I grew up on the Tulalip Reservation. I'm an enrolled member of the Cowlitz tribe, and basically I was the kid where my mom would drag me to powwows constantly growing up, and I spent a lot of that time just kind of sitting in the bleachers playing Game Boy. And it was to the point that I viewed myself as being a gamer before I viewed myself as being Native American. Like my mom would literally come in and smudge the corners of my room while I was playing Grand Theft Auto 3, which if you've ever played Grand Theft Auto 3, you get it. And, I basically like learned throughout that process and, eventually kind of going to more tribal events and things like that, as good as I am at Mario Kart 64, loving my culture is like maybe a little bit more important than that. And then also like loving video games and loving my culture don't have to be mutually exclusive. I can do both.
You grew up in the Pacific Northwest, obviously, as you mentioned, you were going to celebrations on the Tulalip Reservation. Talk to me about how some of those memories showed up in the animated film that you just are putting out.
So I think that this film it's really just like a representation of, my life and the things that I love. And I tried to really make the short as authentically as possible. So the mom in the short is wearing a woven cedar hat, which is something that traditionally members of the Cowlitz tribe wear. The dad is Cherokee, and he's wearing like a traditional Cherokee like ribbon shirt. And I work with Suzanne Donaldson, who's a member of my tribe, as a cultural consultant to make sure that all the coastal Salish, like Pacific Northwest indigenous people, references are on point. Even the totem pole that you see in front of the tribal center at the top of the short is based on a totem pole that was in front of the middle school that I went to growing up. And I received permission from the carver, who's a member of the Tulalip tribe, as well as the school to, have the totem pole in the short inspired by just this totem pole that I saw all the time growing up. And, it's a mix of a lot of different art styles. Like growing up, I really loved video games. You have some 16-bit sort of, pixel graphics at the start. My mom is an artist in the Pacific Northwest. She paints a lot of murals and stuff like that. So I made it a point to like have the main chunk of the short inside of the Pow Wow be in watercolor painting, sort of as a reference to my mom's art style. The later part of the short is animated in ledger art, which is this traditional Plains native art style. And, it's just something that I realized in making this short is that like this is probably one of the first times that a powwow has ever been animated in a contemporary sense. This is probably one of the first times that like ledger art has been animated. I'm sure this is the first time that like, a fry bread cook has been used as a running joke in an animated short. And, it was really important for me knowing that I had the resources and opportunity to make this, to really swing for the fences and just make, this as cool and personal yet universal as I possibly could.
It struck me as I was watching it that I was getting some references, but a lot of stuff was kind of flying at me that, wasn't necessarily something that I would get from my personal experience, but somebody who grew up going to powwows would totally get. How important was that for you to kind of have different levels of experience for the audience? Like there's some inside stuff that you kind of have to know and other stuff that's like, any audience member can enjoy.
Well, I grew up loving shows like The Simpsons, and which, weren't necessarily reflective of my culture particularly, but just as a kid who loved jokes growing up, these just amazing like masterclass physical comedy things, Pixar shorts, Looney Tunes shorts are kind of in that bucket too. And it was really important to me to create, that sort of, animated comedy piece, but like set in a contemporary native location. And the great thing about a show like The Simpsons is you can laugh at Homer Simpson or, Sideshow Bob tripping over a rake, regardless of what culture you're from. And yet, if you were a part of that culture, you find so many like really great in-jokes that like you might not necessarily catch if you're not part of that culture.
Or there's like political references, that like a kid might not get, but an adult does. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like we had like a largely indigenous team working on the production. And I had Morgan Thompson, who's a really fantastic member of the Cherokee tribe and an animation artist. And notes that I would give her were like, hey, can we put some like Pendleton blankets, like saving seats in the bleachers in the background? Or like, I want to see some like 2-liter Pepsi bottles all over the place, which are just, hyper specific things that like native folks will get. And like non-natives, if you get it, cool. If not, no worries. And there were a lot of really deep, political references in the short too. Like, there's not to spoil too much, but there's a flashback sequence later in the short where you see, a few images from the Alcatraz takeover of the late 1960s. There's a moment where you see the Standing Rock water protectors, where you see that animated as ledger art over a copy of the Fort Laramie Treaty, which we received permission from the National Archives to include in the short. And the Fort Laramie Treaty was the treaty that was broken in the Alcatraz Dakota Access Pipeline actions that were taken. And something that I'm really proud of is we actually have, if you watch the short, actual audio from the Standing Rock protests that we received permission from a really great documentary crew who was on the scene on some of the more intense days of those actions. And we included that in this, short that's 8 minutes long and largely full of physical comedy beats, because it really was important for me to like have the emotional beats hit and feel real, and for it to feel as like authentic as possible, even if you might not necessarily catch that, upon first watch.
Yeah. And like you say, it transitions between these animation styles where it's almost like the depth of feeling or the depth of meaning of some of the scenes, are treated with different art styles, like more appropriate to like the person whose story is being told. I don't know. It's very cool the way you chose to swap between styles that way. Talk to me about Grandma and how her story kind of becomes the heart of Pow. What sort of memories or inspiration were you pulling to bring Grandma to the fore?
Thanks so much for asking about that. So, the Grandma character, when I was in my 20s, I did an internship with my tribe for a PBS News program series called Northwest Indian News. And part of that involved going to different tribal events and helping kind of cover them for the news program. And, something that was a really big, I think, awakening for me about the importance of Native culture is going to all these tribal events where I essentially was just looking for places to charge my cell phone all across the Pacific Northwest while I was, filming these things. But in doing that, having a lot of really great conversations with other Native folks about Native identity, Native culture, Native activism, just what it means to be Native. And it kind of reframed the conversations that I had with my mom when I was a little kid, where she'd be dragging me to powwows. Of realizing that powwows in, Native culture, that's not just something that my mom is into. It's something that, hundreds of years of generations of Native folks have fought, our, forced erasure, attempted genocide and all that for our culture to still exist. So my mom inviting me to a powwow isn't just her trying to bore me on a Saturday morning. It's her trying to create a link in the chain of maintaining Native culture. And it really showed that celebrating your culture is a revolutionary act. And when you frame it in that way, it kind of becomes the coolest thing ever, And so for me, I really wanted that to be reflective in Jake's relationship with his grandmother. And then also kind of this idea that spoilers for the short, I guess, to Jake, he's a kid. He kind of gets to choose if he wants to dance on the powwow floor or not. Whereas for his grandmother, who, had a history of boarding schools and a lot of other things, she kind of didn't get that choice. And I think that in the short, Jake kind of realizes the importance of I get to choose. One, this elder fought for me to get to even be in this cultural situation. And two, she's had this taken from her. So by dancing, I'm kind of honoring her contributions as well. And, it is definitely complex for what is essentially an, 8-minute Looney Tunes short, basically. But it was just really important to me to have that be a kind of a facet of the story.
And Grandma brings that to Jake with a light touch, She loved video games too. She's here, have a game, do whatever. But through the connection with her and Jake, he's able to have his eyes opened. And as you say, it sort of reframes the powwow for him as something that's punk rock and powerful and something that would appeal to a teenager. And yeah, it's just really lovely the way that turn happens. Again, spoilers. Spoilers for the animation.
Well, it's like there's this quote that I've heard a lot over the past couple of years that like when you are trying to learn your tribe's language and you speak in your tribe's language but you mispronounce words, your ancestors are smiling because you're trying. And I think that there is also that aspect of it for both Jake and the grandmother character of like, yeah, both of them are kind of new in some ways too, you know, dancing and going on the Pow Wow dance floor. And I'm sure there is some level of like self-consciousness to it. But like by going out and giving it a try, it's like everybody, like, it's just like by being there, by being present in the space, you're contributing, you know?
Yeah.
Like even if you're not the best at this.
So let's talk about that Peabody, shall we?
Great.
You are a television, an animated, television writer and other kind of television too. But you have credits on big shows like Looney Tunes, Paw Patrol. You are also a staff writer on the Peabody-nominated Spirit Rangers, which is on Netflix. It's about 3 Native American kids who turn into animals to protect a national park. First off, before I ask you about the Peabody, what is the secret, do you think, to great kids television?
I think that like I did not enter into the entertainment industry wanting to write kids television. That wasn't necessarily like my specific goal. I came up through, the alt comedy scene where I would do, shows, at 2 a.m. in front of drunks in a black box theater or whatever.
UCB, right?
Yeah. Like the UCB theater, like Second City and all that stuff. So I'm not necessarily coming at writing for kids TV from a like academic lens. What I am trying to bring to it is basically like trying to tell stories that I wish I had growing up. And that's something that I think was really, universal working on the show Spirit Rangers. Like I had a lot of conversations with the show's creator, Chris of Valencia, who's a member of the Shumash tribe and just a really genius TV writer. And, it was basically this realization that like Spirit Rangers was the first kids animated series created by a Native person with an all Native writers room. And
is that true? Wow, it was the first.
Yeah. It was the first created by a Native person with like an all Native writers room, and Native characters voiced by Native actors and all that. And we kind of went into it with this realization of we growing up never had that. So what do we wish that we had on screen? And how can we, now that we're in this position, working on this, high budget Netflix show, how can we bring that to like the next generation of kids?
And how does it feel now that you've got this big recognition having the Peabody nomination?
It's truly insane. I'm very grateful for it. I think that you don't go into this career expecting big awards and laurels like that. But I don't know. It's very validating because, and I think this is something you can definitely see in, things like POW and other things that I've worked on, in that I think that a lot of people, natives, non-natives, marginalized folks, etc., when you're growing up, you feel really alone. And like your experiences are, you're an alien, and the experiences that you're going through make you weird because nobody else has ever gone through them. And to, work on a show like Spirit Rangers or things like POW and tell these like, what are these like deeply personal stories with like a lot of personal connections and, nuggets of truth to them that, apply to like my life and, the other writers' lives specifically. And to have it like resonate with people on such a strong level where we're, getting nominated for Peabodys and Emmys and all of this stuff and, screening POW at a place like SIF. It's just, it's validating creatively, but more than that, it's sort of like validating personally in that, like growing up as a scrawny Native kid who loved video games, like I'm not alone in that. There's like I'm sure a million other scrawny Native kids who love video games too. And, it's kind of like in writing for these shows, I kind of feel like I'm my own therapist, and it's like I'm trying to kind of create the healing things that I could have used when I was, an 11-year-old growing up on the Tulalip Res or whatever.
Thank you so much for being here, Joey. Joey Clift is a comedian, Emmy and Peabody-nominated TV writer, director, as well as an enrolled member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe. He's the creator of the short film Pow. If you can see it in person, I recommend. It's gorgeous. Joey, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I love NPR. This is great.
This conversation aired back in May, but the short is available to stream today. Joey said, "I'm really happy Pow is premiering Thanksgiving week. This is one of the few times of the year where Native people and culture are on people's minds, and my hope is that Pow gives Natives and non-Natives an authentic, modern Native story to watch and share during the holiday week." You can find it at the First Nations Experience. That's fnx.org. And for more information about the other stuff Joey Clift is up to, you can hit up his website, joeyclift.com. And that is it for Soundside this week. I am producer Jason Burrows. Today's show was produced by me, with support from our host Libby Dankman, supervising producer Sarah Leibovitz, and my fellow producers Hans Anderson, Gabrielle Healy, and Maliha Syed. Our editor is Jed Kim, and we will be back tomorrow with more Soundside right here on KUOW.